Shalom, shalom, and welcome to the ministry of Shofar. I'm Rabbi Matthew Spivey, and we're just very excited about what God was going to have for us today. Again, welcome, welcome, welcome. We're in a very fascinating season. We're coming up on the season of Shavuot, or Pentecost. And that is setting the precedence for everything that we've been about as this time has been elevating our thoughts and just kind of allowing us to ascend to his presence. So again, welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm excited about what God will have us to share, how us to teach this day. We're undergoing a study in the of the kingdom culture. The kingdom culture. We call it kingdom culture 2, in fact, because this thing has continued to progress as God is unfolding more and more revelation to us so that we can be about kingdom dominion. But I tell you what I want to do right now. As we prepare our hearts for where God is going, what he'll have us to do, I want us to enter into just a time of worship. So here comes a season or a song of worship. And I'll return to you right after this. Again, much blessings.
Let your glory shine. We want to see you. We want to know your spirit burn inside. Our hearts purify. We want to see you. We want to know you. Adonai, we welcome you here. We want to see you. Adonai, we welcome you here. We welcome your glory. We welcome your power. We welcome you here. This very hour, we welcome your glory. your spirit fill our hearts again like the flowing water and the blowing wind. Let your spirit fill our hearts again. We want to see you, we want to know you. Adonai, we welcome you here. We want to see you, we want to know you. Adonai, we welcome you here.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam
Shema Israel, Adonai Elohim, Adonai Echad. A passage that's forever dear to my heart. Powerful passage from Deuteronomy 6:4. A foundational scripture for the nation of Israel and for all we who are grafted into that nation. God's covenant people. We are God's covenant people. Let's go to God in prayer. Abba, Father, in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach, God, we bless you this day, for you are truly King of the universe. Father, you're Lord of all. And Father, we stand in awe of the majesty of your name and for whom we belong. Abba, I ask that your Holy Spirit will fill this place this day. Gift me, breathe through me, God, the breath of understanding and revelation. Allow me to speak to your people. Father, as we steward them, Father, as we speak words of life by the power of your Spirit. So Abba, I ask that you breathe through the airways, breathe through every home, gift them with the gift of life, gift them with the gift of healing, gift them with the gift of restoration of all health and wealth. Bless them, Father, as we prepare our hearts to ascend with you in this season, this incredible season. And Father, we thank you for everything. And Abba, I just turn this time into your hands. May you get all glory, and may you be honored this day in this place. As we say, Amen and Amen and Amen. Praise be to God. Praise be to God. Again, I'm excited about what God is doing in this study. We're endeavoring to go to a much deeper understanding what God has for us in this whole season of restoration and rejuvenation. This season of elevation. God, as he takes us to higher heights and deeper depths. Again, we're in a study called the Kingdom Culture. Kingdom Culture 2, in fact. And we're going to pick up to where we left off last week. I want to pick up with our study. The study of building a kingdom mentality. Building a kingdom mentality. You know, I want to, as we begin this day, earlier in the study of kingdom culture, I made a very interesting statement when I said, none of us are born with a culture. We are born into a culture, but we're not born with a culture. Now think about it. Once we broke from the womb, We began to grow in this worldly environment that shaped and influenced us with its customs and values. All of its morals and all the social norms of our parents and the community that we were raised in. It encompasses the society in which we arrived. It's within this society that we learned all the language, and all about the laws within this country as such. It's here that I also learned all my prejudices, hatreds, jealousies, greed, and spirit of pride. It's within this culture, within this society, within this social norms. But the ironic thing is in all this as it shaped me, this culture that shaped me, that I perceived as the norm. As the norm. Because we all are raised and brought into this society that I would call either America or England or France. I can call Iowa. There's a society, there's a norm that I perceive as my norm because that's how I was raised. But then, one day, we discovered the kingdom of heaven. Praise God. And that's when we were born again and we became kingdom citizens. And that's when everything changed. And all the challenges began with the war that's going on in my mind. In my last study, I was asking why we struggle so much. And that's what was the basis of this when God had me go back and says, because you were born in a culture and you're raised in it. That's how you think. But all that I just shared, none of that caught God by surprise. For Scripture, I look into His Word, describes those early states, our early state, with much more vivid truth and clarity of depth and the fullness of reality more than I could ever envision. See, because I really didn't know. I really didn't understand that. But I tell you what I want to do. I want to read it from the Voice translation. I love the way this translation rendered that state, because I think it communicates our early states so much more effectively than I could ever do. If you want to turn with me to Ephesians 2, I'm going to be reading from the verses 11 through 13. And this is how it reads. So never forget how you used to be, those of you born as outsiders to Israel. You were outcast, branded, the uncircumcised by those who bore the sign of the covenant in their flesh, made with human hands. You had absolutely no connection to the Anointed One. You were strangers, separated from God's people. You were aliens to the covenant that they had with God. You were hopelessly stranded without God in a fractured world. But now, because of Yeshua, the Anointed, and His sacrifice, all that has changed. God gathered you who were so far away and brought you near to Him by the royal blood of His Anointed, our liberating King. He is the embodiment of our peace. He was sent once and for all to take down that great barrier of hatred and hostility that has divided us, so that we can be one. So that we can be one. Amen and amen. The text says that we were so far away. Far away from what? From the kingdom of God. From his kingdom. We were so alienated. But by the mercies of God, by his mercy alone, snatched me from the kingdom of darkness and brought me into the kingdom of light. We were so far away. It says we were separated. It says we were separated from God. You know that word, when you think about it, to understand the power and depth of that, to be separated from God, is what drove Yeshua to his knees. You know, I used to always kind of wonder, when he went to the garden, he prayed so earnestly. He said, Father, if it be thy will, take this cup from me. But not my will, Father. Thy will be done. And I was, I could see where Hollywood or different commentators and people would try to comment as to the agony and the passion of what transpired. Some people talk about, he was scourged to the point in which Scripture even says that he no longer even looked like a man. But it's for us that he did this. And I started wondering, what was the greatness that transpired in that garden? It said that he sweated great drops of blood in the midst of his plea. And when I go back to think about it, I can try and say, was it the cross? No, to me, it wasn't that. It's more than that. For it says, for the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross. Was it the being spit on, being reviled, the crucifixion? What drove him to his knees? When I come back to think on it, the power of what it was. For Yeshua told his disciples, his Talmudim one time, he said, don't fear, don't worry about the man who can just kill this flesh. He said, you be fearful of the one who can take that soul and cast that in hell. That's the one. It goes past the flesh. That's the one you should fear. I believe with all my heart, with all that's within me, the thing that drove him to his knees was to experience the separation from God. To experience what Adam felt when you were outside of God. See, and I didn't really fully understand all that to the depth when God says, remember where you come from. Remember. You were in a world that was fractured without God. You're lost, separated from the covenants. You're outside of the permitted will, or but reduced from the fall. When Adam fell, he says when he screamed, I can see it when that spirit just left him. That, as God says, you were without covenants. You were without God. Separated, alienated from his grace. But by God's mercy, he brought us in. He translated me from the kingdom of darkness into the kingdom of light. And I am so thankful. Last week, I say all that because last week we had concluded our study by broadening our understanding of ecclesia. Because that's what Yeshua called his body. That's what God calls us. When we're redeemed, We were grafted in to this covenant grace. Yeshua used the word ecclesia, and we come into a clearer understanding of that word with its call to ambassadorship. See, it means, it speaks in terms, of what he had done. When God gathered us. When I think in terms of ecclesia and the fullness thereof, it says, with ecclesia, its meaning, the power that came from it is that it took us, when we've seen the broadness, where it took us from, with this call to ambassadorship, it's like moving us from its religious application or expression to embracing its governmental commissioning of deployment. Let me say that again. This call to ambassadorship, this whole thought is moving us from a religious application. You know, this is not a churchy thing. That's not a religious thing. It's from its religious application or expression to embracing its governmental commissioning of deployment. That's what Yeshua said. He says, upon this revelation of Shimon, I will build my ecclesia. We understood that to be a governmental term. This ambassadorship took place when he had deployed us and embraced us with this call. It took place at our time of our salvation, at the time when we were grafted into the covenants of his kingdom. And as being grafted into his covenants, that's when Yeshua looked at us and he turned around and says this over in John. He says, when he commissioned his Talmudim, his disciples, he commissioned us. He says, just as the Father sent me, I am also sending you. Rabbi Shaul fully embraced this commissioning facet of what Yeshua had done, as he affirmed it over in 2 Corinthians 19, in which he says, so we are now representatives. I love, this is the Voice translation again. I love the way they placed it. So we are now representatives of the Anointed One, the Anointed King. God has given us a charge to carry through our lives, urging all people on behalf of the Anointed One to become reconciled to the Creator God. So it's not so much me about being saved and sitting back and just trying to keep myself on soil, or just sitting back and fastening my seatbelt and going along with the ride. We have been commissioned with a call and a purpose on earth. We have been ordained that as God has been restoring us, bringing us back into our original intent, his original intent that he purposed for us in taking dominion in the sphere. I believe it's God's strategy all along to proclaim his kingdom, through our ambassadorship. If we can understand this term and understand the fullness and the reality of what is contained within that term, for we define the term ambassador during our last study as an official or messenger or an envoy representing a higher authority. I'm speaking in terms of, when I speak of this, I'm speaking both natural as well as a spiritual application of what God is doing, or what this word entails. Because on the, in the earth realm, we're familiar with various different ambassadors that have been deployed to different countries. Our ambassador of France, our ambassador of Israel, our ambassador of China. See, we can hear the term, but as a common citizen and such, I hear them, but I don't understand all the power and all the thrusts what that all entails. What do they do? What is the embodiment of that term, ambassador? For Scripture comes back and defines us as ambassadors. There's much more that that's being entailed with that thought, with that statement. Again, In the natural, it says an ambassador is an official messenger or envoy representing a higher authority. I could try to say representing his government. But in case of us, in case of we as citizens, or in cases we as part of this ecclesia, this higher authority that we're representing is God himself. The kingdom of heaven that hit the earth when Yeshua came. And he told them, for the kingdom of heaven is near. It has arrived. We as ambassadors, God, I believe it's God's strategy to proclaim his kingdom through his ambassadors. You know, the power comes in saying this. See, when we start learning to see ourselves as ambassadors, it'll change the way we think, the way we speak, and how we act. I've got to see myself as a dignitary, a divine dignitary, as a representative of the kingdom of God. That's how come we start speaking in terms of having, rebuilding a kingdom mentality so that I can walk and I can talk as a dignitary. I was representative of God himself. You know, last week I want to do it again this week. I want to be able to talk about, just review the responsibilities and the privileges of ambassadorship. The responsibilities and privileges of ambassadorship goes like this. Listen to this. An ambassador speaks in the name of the government he represents. And as we speak in terms, as I define this, you can just transpose that word government to God's heavenly government. It's natural and spiritual. He speaks in the name of the government he represents. Here's another one. He conveys no personal opinion, but only the policies of his government. His words are backed up by the full military might and the treasury of his nation. As I review these, I want to be able to unveil these in our next study. But here's another one. His concern is only the interest of the government he represents. He's not getting caught up in a lot of other things. Again, another one. He maintains connection and communication with his government. That's powerful. That's powerful. An ambassador carries out the policies of his government. An ambassador, his priority is to carry out the assignments of his government. He's not there to sightsee. He's not there just to enjoy the weather and the people. His priority is to carry out the assignments of his government. And lastly, it says this. His government meets all his needs. I want to unpack that in our next study. All those descriptors. Now, as I share this, and I want us to embrace this thought of ambassadorship, we want to understand the fullness of it. See, our dominion authority is best illustrated in the function of ambassadors and the embassies. Wow, Rabbi, where are we going with this? This is paramount when we understand the role of the ambassador. For Scripture says, we are just pilgrim travelers moving through this time. This is not our home. But God has given us this in this fallen condition. But God has given us the authority and the empowerment to have dominion, to rule, and to govern this sphere, this realm. And when I understand that role as this dignitary, built in the image of God, and understand the dwelling place that I occupy, as an embassy, where an ambassador operates from. This dominion authority can be well viewed through that analogy, through this illustration. Let me show you something. You know, when nations, let's say when two nations establish formal diplomatic relations with each other, they open up embassies in their respective capitals. We've seen that within our time, where our president had relocated the embassy from Tel Aviv, I'm speaking in terms of Israel, from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Why? Because he recognized and they defined, it came into alignment with Jerusalem, or with Israel, that had defined their capital as Jerusalem. And because of the relationship, because of the fact that it's its capital, it's at the heart of that country, it's at the heart of that nation, we moved our embassy into the heart of that country, to Jerusalem, that embassy. Now, I know there's all you people out there that's so much more wiser than I that can understand everything I'm sharing, but just for the sake, for my edification, for me just to revisit or to understand the basics or the primary facet of this thought that I'm sharing. Did you know that the land in which the embassy resides, that's located, is considered a sovereign territory of that country, of our country? Now that sounds kind of muddied. I said the land that that embassy resides, that it sits on, within that block, within that area in Israel where that embassy sits, has been translated from Israel, and now all of a sudden it becomes a piece of America that has brought it and sits on that land. It's no longer Israel's country, Israel's land. It is a sovereign piece of territory that defines this nation of the United States. So even though it's located in a different continent, a different country, when that building's set down, it's like taking America, taking the United States from here, pick up a hunk of it and setting it right in the midst of that country. Whether it be Israel, whether it be Europe, whether it be France, when they set it, it's like taking the heart of this country. Literally, it's like the soil becomes, that soil in which the embassy resides, like it becomes a miniature country unto itself. That's how come when an American citizen, when we visit Israel, although we're outside home, if I was to go to that land, I have all the rights and the privileges that I have here. I'm still home. It's America. Now, in the same way, what I'm saying, in the same way, we as ambassadors of the kingdom, that's what happens to our very homes, to our offices, the churches, or anywhere our influence extends, becomes an embassy of heaven. What are you saying? I'm saying, as I stand there, God has issued us as ambassadors into a multi-array of environments and arenas. Whether it be my home, if he sends out, I'm walking to my office. I'm no longer just a commoner walking in. I am an ambassador. I am walking with the full authority of heaven behind me. When I sit at my desk, this whole little arena is heaven's authority, heaven's gate. This house, this office is my embassy of such. I'm trying to change a mind. I'm trying to get us a mindset. We have to start thinking totally different. See, as a citizen and as a child of the King, I remember as I was translated from the kingdom of darkness into the kingdom of light, I came back into my house and I dedicated everything. I prayed over the house. I prayed over the equipment. I prayed over the furnishings. I prayed over the clothes. I sanctified everything under the domain of the King, of God. And see, I wasn't even thinking ambassadorship in the mindset. I had come to understanding that I'm no more but a steward. For the earth is the Lord and the fullness thereof. I'm a steward. And I took my thrust of me owning things and put it back into the hands of the eternal King. That mindset exists specifically within the mind of an ambassador. He owns anything. He's a steward. But he represents a nation and a government that placed him into that city, into that country. He's not a commoner. When they speak to him, it's like they're speaking to the president, they're speaking to our nation. To attack him is an act of war. It's how powerful this position is. And when God had called us and commissioned us as his Talmudim, as his ambassadors, as his chosen one, handpicked, he's letting us know. He said, I'll never leave you nor forsake you. Whatever thing you ask in my name, I will do. Just as the Father sent me, I'm sending you. Greater things than this that you will do that I have done. Why? Because you're built in my image. You are my appointed. You're my chosen. You're my ambassadors. And you're carrying the full weight and authority wherever you go. See, once I start understanding that piece, I start getting much more clarity of an illustration I've seen in the scriptures, in the Tanakh. See, you remember when Moshe turned and he saw the bush burning. It says he turned to see the bush burn. He went to see this amazing sight. As he turned to see this, something was said. And I spoke about this, but not in the way that I perceive it now with what God has showed me in regard to my home, my house, my office, my job. Wherever I go, I am a walking nation representing him. But Moses approached that bush, and over Shemot, Exodus 3:5, it says this: when he came close, God told him, he says, stop. Don't come any closer. He said, take off your sandals, off your feet, because the place where you stand, where you are standing, is holy ground. And I shared this story many times when I went to read and understand what God has just said. I said Moses had been up and down that mountain many times. He had probably had his sheep graze there. He wasn't like he was walking into foreign territory. But now, he says, in that same place where he had resided before, he had visited before, he had walked through before, he's seen a sight that transcended everything. He's seen a bush that was burning, but wasn't consumed. And as he walked up on it, just as he would have done the day before, or maybe earlier that morning, something happened. As he walked toward that bush, God told him to stop, don't come any closer. Because now, the place where you're standing has become holy ground. Heaven has landed in this spot, and it's not your common area no more. That same thing. God used that same illustration when the angel approached Joshua. You remember? Outside of Jericho. He said, Joshua had been given a charge to take Jericho. I could see him in the early morning, probably out on the ridge, looking, trying to understand how he was going to achieve this. If I step into Spivey 13, I'm saying he's looking and just thinking and just pondering. What is the best approach? How, militarily, how would he develop a plan to take the city? And then say why he's looking. He said, as he stood, all of a sudden he looked up, and there standing before him was an angel, bearing a sword in his hand. I know Joshua probably stopped and just took a look, and Joshua asked a question. He said, are you for us? Or are you for them? And the angel looked at him and said, neither. But he represents the army of God. But he told Joshua the same thing God spoke to Moshe. Over in Joshua 5:15, he told him this. He says that he's the commander of Adonai's army. And he answered Joshua. He said, take off your sandals off your feet, because the place where you're standing is holy. Same thing, same principle. Something translated that ground from common to holy. Change that ground from what it was at one point, common, to representing something much more bigger, much more broader. Yahweh said, the angel said, when he said, the place where you stand is holy. In the same place as ambassador. See, this angel is nothing more but a messenger. But when he stood, he was representing heaven. And that arena, that place where he stood, had become heaven on earth. As ambassadorship, he says, when you walk into your dwelling place, it's almost like the embassy. The same principle. He says, where that ground sits, at one point it's common. At one point it was nothing but dirt. But now, because of the status of who I am, because of my ambassadorship, because of what God has made me as an emissary of the Most High, now that land, that place, that embassy, my home, my house, my job, my surroundings, when I walk in, I'm not just a commoner, I'm not an everyday citizen. God has called me his ambassador, his emissary, his envoy, to speak for the kingdom of God. And all the thrust, all the power, all the weight, all the military might, everything that is encompassed in heaven comes with me. Because as I'm walking in, I'm not walking in bare and stripped. I'm walking with the full power and authority of the God Most High. As an ambassador, I walk in with the full weight of the government that I represent. See, I'm not down here as some simple employee working somewhere. My mind's got to be elevated. I've got to have a rebuild mentality. I've got to think like a dignitary. I've got to think of the role that God has placed me in. I'm built in his image, breathed upon, filled by his spirit. And the Most High God calls me his emissary. He calls me his ambassador to proclaim his kingdom on earth. So I've got to have this mind shift and start thinking, have a rebuild to start thinking with a kingdom mentality, and to understand that I am a dignitary, I am an ambassador, I am an emissary of the Most High God. It'll change the way I think. It'll change the way I speak. It'll change the way I behave. When I understand the full weight and worth of who I am. That's how powerful an embassy is. In that country, in that nation, they look upon it as the nation itself sitting there. See, our call to ambassadors, to be an ambassador of the King of the universe, might seem somewhat overwhelming. You think, like, who am I? Wow. Rabbi, who am I? That seems so vast, so big. It's more than just fairy tale, just talking words. I'm saying, once we get this into our mind, once we understand our worth, once we see this, everything will change. This call of ambassadorship, to be ambassadors of the King of the universe, might seem overwhelming. But the pressure of that responsibility is greatly reduced when we realize all we have to be concerned with is simply speaking the words of the King. And again, as we go into all the responsibilities and privileges, you'll understand this more. See, because an ambassador has no opinion of his own. He's speaking for the nation. An ambassador cannot go in and just start saying what he feels and what he thinks. His whole persona is changed because he becomes a mouthpiece for the nation. And the only thing he can speak from is from the Constitution and the decrees that have been empowered to him to speak. We as commoners, we as people, we're forever spouting off. We're forever sharing what we think and how we think and why you do this. And we show dishonor. We're broken. We're fallen. But God is trying to elevate our minds to have us think and walk according to our original intent. See, like David, a good example, like David and Goliath. See, when that giant came out in that field, he had the army of Israel frozen. Saul, who stood head and shoulders above all of his men, frozen in fear, trembling, because he was looking at him in their own strength and their own might. But when David came out there, it wasn't so much about him. For David said it clearly when he came to him. David understood his role, that he's been used, because he understood the majesty of the Most High. See, he told that Goliath, that giant, when he came out there, he says, "You come at me with a spear and a sword, with your earthly armament, but I'm coming at you in the name of the Lord." God says, "The battle is mine," saith the Lord. See, we speak in terms of David slaying the giant. I think David was just a tool. God killed him. When he threw that stone, God knew exactly where that stone's headed, right between his armament. David says, "I'm not fighting you on a natural level. That's not my battle. I'm coming at you as a representative in the name of the Lord, the God that you blaspheme. How dare you?" As he told the other ones, "You're uncircumcised, Philistine. You're out of covenant. You're far removed from God." So let us not conduct ourselves anymore like vagabonds. Vagabonds, what's that? That's a person who wanders from place to place without a home or a job. He's just wandering, just homeless. Let's not conduct ourselves like he's going from place to place with no responsibilities, or like servants or hired hands who have no personal interest and stake in the land that we're looking upon. But let us move as wise stewards, giving careful and confident management to this realm that God has given us dominion over, that God has given us the task of managing and ruling and governing this realm. We walk as dignitaries. we walk with authority. We walk with the power of the living God. I tell you what, I'm going to stop right here because what I want to do, I want to pick up this study and I want to unpack more of what this whole term, what this whole call that God has moved us into as ambassadors. It's not a new terminology, a new title, but it's one that I think we haven't owned. And God is having us revisit, understand it, walk with it, understand the authority and the power that's all wrapped into that term. When God says, when Yeshua looked at them and says, upon this revelation, I will build my ecclesia, and the gates of hell shall not prevail. I'm going to send forth my representatives, and hell itself won't be able to stand against it. I'm going to establish the authority back on earth. I'm sending forth my ambassadors to take over and be restored to the original call, to have dominion in this realm. I want to pick up that thought here next week. So let's go to God in prayer. Abba, Father, I thank you for all that you're unfolding before us. I thank you for the call and the anointing and the enclothement of this persona, of each of us, as being your ecclesia, being your ambassadors on earth. Father, I pray that your word would go forth, Father, to stir the hearts, stir the minds, as you put us on a course of building a kingdom mentality. Teach us how to walk, how to govern, how to move with power and authority according to your original intent. God, I pray that these words go forth, find good, fertile soil to stimulate the mind, stir the heart, to restore us back to your original intent. Father, let ambassadors arise. Let the kingdom authority of heaven and your will be done on earth as you originally intended. And we'll praise your name both now and forever as we say, Amen and Amen and Amen. Praise be to God. I tell you what I want to do. I'm going to pray for the lives of the people, for every life in this dish. Again, we hold it up before you, God, every opportunity we have. Father, that you will breathe your spirit of wellness and wholeness, that the multiplication table of heaven will descend upon these lives, these precious, obedient lives that are responding and seeding into your kingdom as good stewards of all that you deposited in their lives. Bless their health, bless their wealth. God, allow the fullness of shalom to fall over their lives, over their families, over all that they have. Gift them, Father, that they'll be fruitful and multiply in every way. And God will be careful to give you the glory and honor and praise as you bless these lives, these families that have come in through a multiplicity of ways, over the airways. God, through the mail, hand delivered, moving with the obedient grace. Bless them, enrich their lives as we say, Amen and Amen and Amen. God, we just thank you this day again for all that you're doing and all you continue to do. Hey, as we purpose our hearts to step away today and to return to you next week, I want to give you your Psalms 119 verse. I'm coming to you from Psalms 119 and verse 57. And it says this, Adonai, I say that my task is to observe your words. As an ambassador of the kingdom, that fits well. Adonai, I say that my task is to observe your words. And with that, Father, I want to clothe your people with the richness of your living word, the embodiment of your truth, as you spoke over them, as you had ordained Moshe and Aaron to speak over your people. Father, those words are echoed over us as well, as we all been grafted in to be one. And I thank you for this, Father. So as we prepare our hearts to be with you again, we say, Yerekeka Adonai, Balis Mereka. Ya'er Adonai, Panavaleka, Bihuneka. Yasa Adonai, Panavaleka, Bashem Leka Shalom. May Yahweh bless you and keep you. May Yahweh make his face to shine upon you and show you his grace. May Yahweh lift up his countenance to you and show you and give you his shalom. And Abba, I pray that your people will just be clothed in the richness of those words. May you never leave them nor forsake them. May they be clothed in your favor in all that they do as we move forward this week. And we'll bless your name always as we say amen, amen. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you for just stopping by just to break bread. And thank you just for your all your prayers and your faithfulness to this ministry and to our Holy Father. I want to thank you again for being with us today. Shalom, shalom, and may you be richly blessed in all that you do. Take care, and I'll see you next week.